It is a bit good, unless you want to drag it back.
Do you want to move them up?
Huh?
Do you want to move them up?
It's up to you.
The amount of times I've moved these chairs, it's like playing with musical chairs. So I'll figure out something out. Well, first when we're swapping those, do you want to have a seat back here?
Transfer, but I know what
You don't need to. The authority chair.
I really want.
So I just sat at the fucking section, just watching for like 10 fucking minutes. Hi everyone, does everyone hear me okay? Is that good? I hope everyone online can hear me okay. If you can't, then just put something in the comments on either Instagram Live or YouTube, and one of our members of staff will sort that out. So I'm Alex, I use he, they pronouns, and I'm the returning officer for this election. This is Alvin, he uses he, him pronouns, and he's the deputy returning officer for this election. And we'll both be hosting the event tonight. A few things to note before we begin. So kind of how it will work. Candidates running for each full-time officer role will speak in turn, starting from the role of the least candidate, so that with the most. Obviously, this is like, not everyone may have turned up tonight. We've done it based on who's running in the actual election. Each candidate will have 1 minute and 10 seconds to answer each question. Questions will be submitted, audience questions will all be submitted online via our Menti platform. So if you go to, I believe it's menti.com, and there is a code on the board over there, please submit your questions to us because we want to hear them. It's about students after all, and making the student, it's your union, so please submit your questions. As well, so the link as well for people online is in the description of the YouTube live stream, Instagram Live. I'm sure we'll get that in the chat for you in a second. We will have two questions from us, provided there are no Menti questions in advance, and then one question from the audience. But yeah, so throughout this event, all candidates and audience members alike must remember to follow the election rules. In terms of this, you're not allowed to campaign ad hominem, which means essentially attacking the character, motive, or other attribute of the person making the argument or persons associated with the argument, rather than attacking the substance of the argument itself. Essentially, you can't insult any other candidates. This would count as misconduct or defamatory under Rule 4.18.1. Candidates are also responsible for their campaign teams, in that if you're an audience member who's part of a campaign team and you break election rules, it essentially could lead to the candidate you're representing facing the consequences. We also have one of our SU staff members here, Becca, who's just sat at the front. If you have any wellbeing concerns, we have a room, I think we have the downstairs seminar room booked as well, kind of a chill out wellbeing space if anyone needs it. Overall, please help this space to be one of free and fair debate, and the chance for us all to celebrate and learn more about our fantastic candidates and their campaigns. Yeah, a few other little quick things as well. Menti questions will be addressed to all candidates, so please not any specific ones. And for candidates, we'll be ringing a bell. Do you want to test the bell? Yeah. At the end of your time, and we have a 15 seconds wrap up warning as well. So we're going to start with wellbeing officer. So can I have Naila to the front, please? Question? Yes.
Can you just say that the Menti is the questions for all candidates and not role specific?
So essentially,
They're role specific.
They're role specific, but they will be asked to everyone at the front, essentially. So not to a specific candidate. Yes. So we will be answering we'll be asking them, but they will obviously come from you. They're just going to be essentially make sure no one sends in any rude questions essentially before they're read out. Right. So Naina, how are you? Yes.
You said there'll be a 15-minute bell. Is that the same bell? 15 seconds, sorry.
That'll just be on a sign,
Okay.
and then the bell will be at the end of your time. So I'll pass you the mic. Can you hear me okay through this one? Does that work? Yeah. Right, brilliant. So, Naina, I hope you're doing well. Can I ask you to list 3 things that you're most passionate about regarding making change as an officer?
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So some of the bigger things that I've been looking at is like crisis support within the university, sort of working towards making sure that security is welfare focused, has emergency mental health support, is trained in mental health first aid, safeguarding, crisis intervention and de-escalation, essentially because we don't want cops on campus again. That was awful. We really don't want that to happen again. I want to work on the university, like reprioritizing student well-being, building trust in the student body to actually reach out to them rather than having them seek support elsewhere, just because we have kind of seen how the university has long waiting times. The support isn't really as good as it used to be. And the last thing I want to kind of focus on is like supporting marginalized students. We've seen like so many communities go through so much because the university is sort of actively harming them. We've had really, really terrible things happening, and I kind of want to work with the university to make sure that that doesn't happen, and also with the SU to make sure that we have safe spaces for those groups in our union, and working with the university to make sure that happens.
Brilliant, right? Cool. I was going to say, just for noise levels as well, can we try jazz hands maybe? Just for like, if anyone in the room just like wouldn't be the best with like us. Cool, that's my bad for not saying it earlier. But no, so the second question for you, Naina, can you name one way that the union or / university is seeking to support student wellbeing and explain how this can be improved?
I think like one of the main things that is really important to me is after I'm in my 3rd year and after accessing university support throughout my 3 years, is making sure that like all processes are streamlined, funded better and are really transparent. Making sure that the university is like offering support at every level. So your academic advisor needs to be like briefed on all the support that you can access, know where to signpost you, but also tutors for every classes, knowing where to signpost you, not having to wait three weeks to get your reasonable adjustments in place, or waiting to hear back for your exceptional circumstances claim for 2 months, or waiting for your appeal for really, really long, having the reporting system in one place. Getting support like within 24 hours if you submit a report, having housing support, just making sure that the university is kind of not leaving you in crisis, and having more funding and a way for the university services to work better and for students.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And question from the audience to close it out. How are you going to make sure that you work as a team with the other full-time officers?
I mean, I think working as an officer team, I've been a part-time officer this year, so I've worked with the full-time officers a little bit, and it's been really clear how they kind of work together and make sure that they're like supporting each other in every way. And one of the things I've kind of noticed which works really well is like knowing what the other officers are working on and seeing how you can collaborate with them and how you can help them in those spaces. For example, I mean, like off the top of my head, for example, Neve's working on like better housing and more affordable housing for students, and that's something that kind of links in with cost of living, and just working with other officers to make sure that you're pushing for things with the university on different levels and making sure you're doing it together rather than sort of butting heads and doing it in different ways and different strategies.
Brilliant. So thank you so much, Naina. Everyone give a jazz hands essentially. But yeah, well done, Naina. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. Yeah. Brilliant. So I'm going to pass over to Al now, who is going to introduce our sports societies and events section. So can I have Cara, Steve, and Ivana, I'm so sorry for pronouncing that wrong, to the front, please, if you're here? Oh, yeah. Yeah, pass it to the cameras.
Then we'll do different questions. Carl can go first. The next one. Cool. So first question is, list 3 things that you're most passionate about making change for as an officer.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? Thanks for being here. Yeah, 3 things I'm passionate about making a change as an officer. Number 1 is the student union being a well-functioning organisation, just to be blunt. I think particularly as students, we have loads of brilliant ideas. We have loads of things that we want to do with the best will in the world, but it's not always possible. Sometimes people are waiting ages to get responses. Sometimes the institution isn't responding to things as quickly as possible. Sometimes staff are incredibly burnt out and running around. We need to sort that out. Number two, I speak to lots of students at Sussex about things they're going through, and I work for the National Union of Students. I talk to students and student leaders all over the country, and I will never stop being shocked and angry about their living situation during the cost of living crisis that we're in. We pay a lot of money and we give up a lot, 3, 4, 5, 7, 20 years to be part of university, and the living conditions for students really aren't good enough. And then that kind of leads on to the third one, which is a sense of community. I think when university and student union life functions at its best, it can be a really beautiful, inspiring place where people have fun, meet people, try new things, have a wonderful time, and really feel part of something. And I think, I really feel like everyone should be able, is that 15 seconds? To be a part of that. Thank you very much.
Do you need the question again?
I have the question. I was like checking if time was okay. Yeah, so I've taken the question in a bit of a different direction, looking at it directly within the role. So for myself, it's access and inclusivity in our groups, because often for international students, for disabled students, we are excluded. I've worked this year with sports, with the current officer, to have accessible sports and have training on that and how to do that. A big part of that is also including hybrid and having all events that we can have a hybrid basis. I want to be able to support students in running their groups with whatever way it's needed. If that's they need to find more people, if they need staff, if they need resources, find what it is, talk to them, have them work together and work directly with students so that we can be as effective as we can for our student groups. And then finally is actually allowing a better handover period, which is looking at other ways you can be involved in the SU, including them in campaigns and liberation, so that everyone is able to engage in every aspect of the SU, so it doesn't become an echo chamber of people. But yeah. I feel like I got the time there.
You hang on to the mic because you can answer first.
Okay.
Cool.
I feel like I have a very high-pitched voice compared to you.
Question 2. What is the biggest challenge facing sports societies and media groups at Sussex, and how would you seek to resolve this?
Yeah, so I don't want to homogenise the 3 groups there, and so I have separated it. For societies, by and large, it feels like resources, from what I know, be that getting emails back from people or having enough spaces to book out, having whatever you need to be able to do your society events. For sports, a lot of it is funding. I've sat on sports committee for the past year, and it's atrocious. Men's hockey, not men's hockey, well, yes, men's hockey, for being able to book out a charity match, they had to pay out of pocket to be able to do a charity match. For men's lacrosse, they didn't have enough safety equipment to be able to play, and they weren't even able to get all the safety equipment they needed. They are by far the worst impacted by funding. For media groups, our biggest issue, I know it's sitting on URF, sitting on media committee, it is having engagement and making sure that everyone knows our media groups, that the badge is all over, have Uni TV, the channel, URF, have us everywhere. Time.
Do I just go, or do you want me to repeat the question?
Sorry, I'm just sorting the question out.
Don't worry.
That's right.
Yeah, no, my next question.
Wait,
Oh,
Steve.
I haven't answered that.
oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Don't want to hear it.
You're in for a
Do you
treat.
need me to repeat the question, or
I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to go. Or
sorry, I
I
was distracted. I'll ask the question again. What is the biggest challenge facing sports societies and media groups at Sussex, and how would you seek to resolve this?
Sure. So I kind of take this as focusing on what's one challenge, and I think it is often, like as Karis mentioned, if you've been around the Students' Union like I have for a few years, at top level currently being chair of council, committee of multiple societies, being a society member, if you're around the SU, which I think a lot of people do, a lot of people are, then you know that one thing that affects almost everything we want to do is funding, and that also bleeds into resources, staff capacity, the number of people that we're able to include in events. And I think we often, again, with the best will in the world, say that we're going to kind of shout louder and demand more funding. But one of the first policies I announced when deciding to run for this position was like a very detailed plan for how we can secure more funding for the entirety of the Students' Union. Again, it's egregious that we pay so much money to go to university, and then every year our Students' Union, has to beg for a little bit of that money back from the university just so that we can take part in activities. Don't take it from me in a 60-second answer. Go on my Instagram, vote.steve, put out a whole plan for how we secure funding. We need to be strategic about it. We need to get lots of students involved. That'll do. What was the next question?
The next question is one from the audience, and it's what motivated you to run for the role?
What motivated me to run for the role? Thank you. So I was first a student, betraying my age, in 2014 to 2015. And I did 2 years of an undergrad at Manchester University, and then I dropped out because of mental health issues, because I didn't feel like I was part of the university community. And then I spent a few years working, running youth programs around this country, internationally, and then a few years as a political campaigner. And then I've gotten steadily more and more involved with the Students' Union over the past 3 years at Sussex. And I've been very close to people who've been working there, and I've seen firsthand a lot of the issues that students face. And I've been partial to how a lot of the decisions are made. And I just basically decided that this is a place where I know that I can do good work. I think I have skills, experience, knowledge, ideas to improve things. And I think the student movement is a beautiful place, and I'm keen to do that.
I'm gonna chorus. I'm gonna answer. Okay, sorry. my brain is so sorry.
That's okay. So for myself, where I went for this role is I started out campaigning within Access Sussex. I'm now disability officer, so I know I can do a good job as officer. I have completely overhauled the PEEP system in the SU. That means students aren't going to die because the university neglects disabled students. I have currently ongoing issues with the library and getting signage for there. I know I can make change, but why I've gone for sports societies and events is I care so much for students as student groups. That includes campaigns, which I originally started in. It includes media groups like URF, which I'm now helping to run, and I want to run so much more, and it's made such a big difference in my life. I genuinely care about students doing the activities they want to do and helping us do whatever we need. I don't like being a big figure. I don't like being on the news. I don't like that sort of stuff. It's not for me. I want to be able to help students do what they can and be able to be as best they can.
Yeah, we have one last question that I'm going to ask you as well. So events form a crucial part of student life, whether they're in person, online, on campus or off campus. How important are events to the university experience, and what would you do to improve events for students?
Is this me first?
Yeah, no.
I just
Yeah, this is confusing.
Hey, it was to be fair, but
Yeah. Please may you repeat the question?
yeah, no worries. Events form a crucial part of student life, whether they're in person, online, off campus, on campus. How important are events to the university experience, and what will you do to improve events for students?
I mean, they're key. It's literally what you should be filling your time around your degree with. And so for myself, I helped lead hybrid learning last year. I've been pushing for it this year as much as I can while focusing on other stuff. But I believe as a union, we should truly have everything we can hybrid. So this, to a level, is hybrid. Council should be hybrid. Meetings should be hybrid, but also have hybrid society events and meetings that maybe have board game society where you can do stuff online and play digital board games. For craft society, maybe you can pick up resources and you can be on a Zoom call or whatever and do that event. Have hybrid events, have hybrid everything, because it means we aren't excluding people because they can't make something that time. I spent a lot of my time in the hospital or other places, and so having hybrid truly means that everyone can be involved. And when we can't make it hybrid, see how we can make it as accessible for all people, particularly disabled people, as possible.
Do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah.
Seems like it's right.
Yeah. Events form a crucial part of student life. I'm going to cut it slightly shorter. Events form a crucial part of student life. How important are events to the university experience, and what will you do to improve events for students?
Yeah, so absolutely crucial. Like, I'm going to expand out events, like all of our student groups, sports, societies, all of our campaigns, events that the SU does. Absolutely crucial part of university. Like, people don't just come to university for a piece of paper at the end of it. People come to university for the experience of meeting people, for the opportunity to be part of something larger than themselves, part of a community. Beyond like amazing skills that you can develop in events, the people that you can meet, just being part of something is absolutely crucial. But this is why I left university in the first place when I dropped out. It was because I didn't feel like I was part of something. And I talked to so many students who literally say, if it wasn't for X sport club or this society, that they would have dropped out of university. And whilst there's definitely way more work that we need to do and must do to make those spaces accessible to everyone, no one should fear discrimination or exclusion in any of our spaces. And we need to do so much more there. At their best, those spaces can be fantastic and they can make the entire experience, which is a huge part of young people's lives that we remember forever. And it's absolutely crucial.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming and speaking today. And now I think we'll move on to Diversity Access and Participation Officer. So can I have Danny, Alan, Mauzier, and I'm so sorry for the pronunciation, Osayaman? I'm so sorry if I butchered that name.
Oh, hold on, we switched the order. There we go.
I will pass you the microphone. Also, just for a bit of clarity, because we had one less person attending that we didn't have all candidates, we'd added an extra question. We'll probably do this kind of going forward. If we're not having full attendance, then add an extra question on, essentially. Right, so thank you. Is that everyone? Brilliant. Thank you all. Thank you to all of you for attending today. I look forward to asking you some questions. So I'll start off again with list 3 things that you're most passionate about making change on as an officer.
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Danny, my pronouns are Daishi. I've been speaking out today, sorry. So the first thing is affordable and accessible housing. This is really important, especially for marginalized students, because one thing that we all have heard of is awarding gaps or attainment gaps, which also is something that is not just solved by events and education support, but also when we come to university and we see that the accommodations are not meant for us, when they're £200 a week or something that it could get to. And also when it's quite inaccessible, that means that this place is not for me. So I wouldn't feel like I belong here. So that also makes awarding gaps so much worse. Also, paying rent, it requires you to work more and is just really stressful. Another thing is improving access to mental health support. So when we are suffering from these issues, when we go to the counselling service, this is the main thing I've been working towards for the last 3 years, improving access to it, diversifying the people there, but also diversifying the therapies available. And finally, is accountability and transparency about racism and transphobia from the university and also the SU. Also, of course, strikes.
So, can you repeat the question again, just make sure?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So list 3 things that you're most passionate about making change on as an officer.
Hello, my name's Alan. 3 things I'm most passionate about when it comes to making change as an officer. First is honestly just transparency. As a student who has been here for up to 4 years now, having done my undergraduate here and doing my master's here now, it can feel so isolating when you just have no clue what's going on, and sometimes it feels like there's so few avenues for learning about what's going on, and when there are, they are just so spread out. You'll have one thing on the Instagram page, one thing on the official website. Sometimes it's buried behind links. And even finding information about the selection was a journey sometimes. And honestly, just making information that we need available. There is so much of my life here that would have been made so much easier if I just knew where to go. So many financial problems that would have been resolvable if I just knew that there was a student finance drop-in and then learned that they'd randomly cancelled that without declaring it. Part of accessibility is making sure that people know where they can access stuff, and that's such a major issue at the university, so that's definitely one of the major ones. Alongside that, definitely housing and just everything to do with living on campus. So many of us feel almost railroaded into living on campus, especially if we aren't from the city, especially regarding the co-op and the
I
housing
will have
available.
to cut you off
And-
there. I'm very sorry, Alan, but thank you so much.
And the third one, seeing discrimination on campus.
Hi everyone, my name's Mauzia, my pronouns are she, her. So the main things that I want to work towards if elected are, number one, breaking down barriers for marginalised groups. There are such a variety of barriers, including academic, financial, discrimination and bias, and everyone deserves to have equal opportunity to succeed and thrive at university. So this will include policies such as making more ethical and inclusive careers fairs and training opportunities for students from marginalised backgrounds. It will include extending student staff co-producing the curriculum programme to make sure assessments, readings, and the whole of the teaching is made accessible for all students. And it will also include working with campaigns like the No Invasive campaign to make sure exceptional circumstances criteria is widened. Number two is cost of living support, but also just general living support. Obviously, this is something that affects all students, but as in wider society, it affects marginalised students the most. That's, affordable, nutritious, culturally diverse meals, cheap buses. And then number three is more funding for liberation work. And this means things like the Race Equity Advocate Scheme and lots of other important things.
Brilliant. Thank you all. Alan, I will have you. Yeah. Alan, I will have you start on the next question, if that's all right. And then again, pass to Mauzia and then back to Danny, if that's possible. So what needs to change about Sussex, be it a union or university, to make it more inclusive of every student on campus?
I mean, absolutely. The main one is make every place that students need to be on campus physically accessible. It would be absolutely hilarious how the only way you can get into the library if you can't walk, be that because you're in a wheelchair or because you've damaged your legs, just for any reason, is to find a hidden entrance around the back that you need a special card to use. I compared it earlier to a level from Resident Evil, for God's sake. It's video game-esque, it's Machiavellian. It just makes no sense. And then you've got issues with accessibility in housing. During my first year, I was one of the lucky people who was able to live in Park Village before they decided to burn it to the ground. It is a stairwell with rooms on the side. There was so much trouble getting in there with the shopping, let alone if you have any genuine accessibility needs. And it is just comical, like, I mean, it would be comical if it wasn't so bloody depressing.
Brilliant. Do you want to pass on to Mauzia? Yep, brilliant. Do you need me to repeat question? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So what needs to change about Sussex, be it the union or university, to make it more inclusive of every student on campus?
Amazing. So there's a number of things in terms of accessibility that you touched on there. That's more step-free access, an accessibility map, just to make sure that everyone knows, which buildings are accessible and how so. It also means quiet and low sensory rooms in all buildings. It means making sure that disabled students get priority for housing. But it also means things like making sure the SU is representing and supporting all student groups equally. And so that includes reviewing student-facing processes in the SU and making sure that anti-discrimination training is available to all SU staff and volunteers, because everyone deserves to be a part of student activities. And there's definitely a lot of work that we can do there to make sure that they're all accessible. So, it's the physical campus, but it's also events and spaces, and the student union should be at the forefront of making sure that is the case.
Can I check this inclusivity?
Yeah, so what needs to change about Sussex to make be it union or university to make it more inclusive of every student?
Just want to make sure.
So first of all, I think we need to move away from putting all diversity access participation issues together and making sure we're centering students who are working on this and all of this work. So pay the students who do liberation work. As someone who has been a part-time officer twice and not been paid for it, as an accessibility rep, not being paid for it, just did it out of passion, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't be paid, because that means people who are not as lucky as me won't be able to do these roles. Also, we need to remove dead names from the university system and make sure that pronouns are incorporated when the students wish to share that. And a big one is online education to be accessible to everyone. So we need to have online optional access to classes. This would help students with caring responsibilities, students who are working, students who are disabled, who might be ill, and COVID is still around, and people who are visiting home right now. Also, sometimes, as someone who's been there, sometimes visa constraints, you can't make it back to the country, and that doesn't mean you don't access your education.
Brilliant. Right, thank you so much. I will have Mausia start for the next question, if that's all right. And the next question that we have is, what have you done? It's from the audience. It is, what have you done so far with your time that will continue if you got this role?
So lots of the work that I've done so far has been around migrant justice. So I was a committee member and then president of Student Action for Refugees for 2 years running, where we worked on campaigns such as the Mighty Mouse Fall campaign, had a lot of success. And we also work to embed the university in the wider community as well. I've also done a lot of work around supporting UCU strikes and running campaigns for student payback. Whilst I'm in full support of the strikes, I think it's also important that student voices are represented in those spaces. And so I hope to continue doing these if I get elected.
Should we go to Danny next, just so you're not in the really to mix it up a bit?
How much time are we given?
So it is 1 minute and 10 for that. And the question is, I'm happy to read it again, is what have you done so far with your time that will continue if you got this role?
Yeah, of course. So I've been, like I said, part-time officer twice. I was a disabled students officer last year, and I've been involved in Access Sussex for the last 2 years very intensely. I was one of the leading campaigners on hybrid learning and accessible housing last year. We had massive wins on those, and I've been pushing for those changes to be happening across this year as well, even though I'm a student and not an officer anymore. Also, I was one of the few people, again, from Access, who made exceptional circumstances twice a year to be done by students with no evidence. You can do self-evidence and also reasonable adjustments. You can ask for, if you're a disabled student, an extra week adjustment twice as well, with no questions asked. I used it myself. It only took me like 10 hours to get approval. I've also been pushing for affordable housing. I used to live in Park Village. I used to pay £91 a week. So I've just been wanting that to come back. And also, like I said, accessible housing. Recently, I stopped the university from basically raising rent for disabled students by cutting down the rent rebate they're doing in just a single meeting.
Do you want the question again?
Yes, please.
That is absolutely fine. So the question is, what have you done so far with your time that will continue if you got this role?
Well, unlike the other candidates, I don't have a very extensive history with on-campus advocacy work. I've not really been able to as a disabled student. And again, that's one of the issues, going back to issues of knowing what's going on campus. But outside of campus, I've done a large amount of advocacy work and just work generally with groups like Palestine Solidarity Campaign, campaigning with my local synagogue, campaigning regarding the workers' strikes that have been going on. And I honestly feel like I can bring a lot of that experience onto campus because so much of it is relevant, and it would honestly be amazing to be able to work alongside people like Mausia and Danny who have got all this experience that I just wasn't able to get during my time here. Because again, so much of living on this campus as a disabled student, and especially during the height of the COVID pandemic and lockdown, I still feel like so many people don't know how horrifically restrictive that was. And that experience was one of the things that really inspired me to come here to stand for this position and be able to change that, because it is maddening. And so much of this is maddening. And honestly, I want to be able to be involved like everyone else has with changing the system.
Have to cut you off there. Thank you so much. And then Danny, are you okay to start for our last question? So the last question we've got for this role is, do you have any specific plans to support LGBT plus students?
Yeah, of course. So I've been a member of the LGBT Society. So one of the things I'd like to do is grow the Cultural and Liberation Network that also involves the LGBT Society, to ensure that lots of queer events are actually inclusive and accessible to lots of people who feel more comfortable in spaces that are also dedicated to them, their specific groups as well. Also, like I said, dead names, get rid of them from the university system. Pronouns, they need to be available. And more gender neutral toilets, we need them. I'm surprised that we have so many toilets that are not gender neutral currently on campus. And again, pushing for support for students who face transphobia. We need to make the university uncomfortable, and we need to make sure people are being held accountable for transphobic actions, and we need the SU to also support trans students.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Do you need the question again?
I was going to say me or Mouse.
Should we go down the line, essentially just like
Okay.
okay, what's the first one?
Question again, please.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Do you have any specific plans to support LGBT plus students?
Well, as a member of the LGBT community and as a gay man, definitely, and I feel like I've quite a personal stake in this, but especially encouraging, at least from my background as a history student, encouraging a greater understanding of LGBT history, of queer history on campus, not just Brighton's particular role in it, but also just generally, because it does feel like at the moment there is this whole culture war narrative going on, and universities like the University of Sussex sort of forced into the middle of it. And people are using this to sort of feign unaccountability and take action against students, which is just appalling in a professional and student context. And I feel that educating people on the history of just LGBT people generally and on the LGBT rights movement, and showing people that we have existed for centuries, we will continue existing. I mean, heck, the first transgender affirming surgery was held back in the 1920s. We are not new, and we have always been here. And I think establishing that for so many people who just aren't taught this will help shift that barrier, because again, there is an ongoing cultural narrative, and it is dangerous to students.
So probably going to be building on quite a lot of the amazing things that you guys have said and some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, mostly around growing these communities. And that also means more funding, the stuff that I was talking about with the SU, you know, that's funding for LGBT History Month. That's where the education comes into it. It also means in anti-discrimination training, that fits in as well. And, you know, that's not only like course reps and committee members and SU volunteers, that's also our academic staff. And in that sense, you know, making pronouns readily available is also super important. So growing those communities, supporting those communities, and also a big part of this role is working with communities that you are not from. You know, I'm from a number of marginalized backgrounds, that's not one of them. And so a big thing for me is listening to those groups and helping to support them and steer the direction that I take the union.
Brilliant. We've heard from everyone there, haven't we? I haven't yet. Brilliant. Right. So thank you so much to all of you for coming and speaking today. And as with everyone else, best of luck with all of your campaigns. So we're going to go for a quick break for about, I think we're going to go for a 10, 15-minute break. So we might have some pizza still left at the front. Reminder of the Menti, so menti.com, and then type in the code there. You can ask questions for the roles to come. And then, can we have any part-time officers who are happy to hear from people today? Can you raise your hands? Part-time officers who want people to come and speak to you. Look around the room. Here are your two part-time officer candidates. Not all of them, but some of them. Please come and speak to them and learn about what they want to do and how they want to make Sussex a better place. But we will be back at, I'm going to say 20 past. So have a short 15-minute break. Feel free to go to the toilet, get some drinks, pizza at the front. Thank you so much for coming.
ready to go.
If you get ready to go, then it's like 2 minutes. Go back to student living sustainability. Yeah.
Good luck. It's going well so far.
How's it going? How's it going? Yeah. Good shot. Guys.
Right, everyone, I think we're going to get ready to restart. Can everyone take their seats? Right, so we're going to continue with Student Living and Sustainability Officer. So if I can have, again, I'm so sorry for names, Aloisi, Ruari, I'm so sorry for the names, Robbie and Neve to the front, please. Have we?
No.
No? Hi. So anyone else with Student Living and Sustainability Officer?
She was here a second ago. So.
Would be good if Neve could be here for David. Thank you. So we'll give a second for Neve to come back in. Does anyone know if any of the other officer candidates are going to be here? Anyone's fancy them? Okay. It's okay. I'll pass over to Alvin, who will be presenting this section.
Cool. So first question is, list 3 things that you're most passionate about making change on as an officer.
Hi. So most things is reducing waste. I want to do circular economy initiatives, introducing it. Reducing waste is a huge thing. We have 1/3 of all food in the UK that's just being wasted. Green initiatives to bring back biodiversity and also help students' mental well-being, especially now during the cost of living crisis. Students' mental well-being has been the worst. I don't want to go into the details, gory graphics of it. And most of all, this cut down the student accommodation. This is the most important one of all, but most of all, also living expenses alongside that.
So I was initially going to say the 3 kind of headers of my manifesto, which is cost of living support, cultural sustainability on campus, and housing justice. And I think cost of living specifically, is something that I definitely want to focus on. The university has 4 subgroups, which are currently just very performative, not fulfilling much support for students, and recently set up a cost of living working group at the Students' Union. And so that can, once that's kind of up and running a bit more, we can think about how to better support students with the cost of living crisis, but also hold the university accountable to do more for its students, because right now it's just sort of ticking a box saying that we have these groups that aren't actually fulfilling anything. Another thing is that I want to have like student representation in places that currently aren't. There used to be a thing called FELG, which is like Facilities Executive Liaison Group, which is basically where university executives meet with student officers to talk about maintenance issues, but at the moment there's no student representation there, and there's no current university sustainability committee either. So I want to try and re-establish those things. And then the final thing would be working with the wider community with different initiatives.
Cool. If you want to hang on to the mic, you can answer the next question first. Next question is, what is needed to make Sussex a more sustainable place to live and study, and how will you lobby the university or union to achieve this?
Cool. So kind of following on from what I was just saying about the wider community things, the recycling currently on campus is, and in Brighton in general, is pretty bad, especially in terms of plastics. And I've already had conversations with Magpie Recycling, and they'd really like to get involved in doing a student drop service where students get paid for dropping down hard to recycle goods like Tetra Paks and plastics. Also, would like to work with Old Tree Soil to work with Roots here on campus to get community composting scheme up and running, so we can have rich soil, but also that any food scraps that come from the kitchen can be converted into soil, which is what we need for biodiversity. And then also want to try and work with other local organisations across the city to try and get zero waste shops here on campus. There's an organisation called Milk and More that they do it in a glass bottle, oat milk in a glass bottle, which would be great. Re-establish a sustainability committee, support the conservation collective on campus, which is basically a load of conservation spots across campus to make sure that they are protected, supported and funded by the university. Thank you. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, definitely. It's what is needed to make Sussex a more sustainable place to live and study, and how will you lobby the university or union to achieve this?
Oh, right, perfect. Well, then going on from what she said, yeah, recycling isn't working out. It is really low. And what most of all I want to do is introduce circular economy living. Most of all because if recycling, we're dependent too much on people to do this recycling. Whilst I feel like if we put circular economy initiatives in student accommodation, refillable laundry detergent, refillable soap, to add that to student accommodation, make it more of a community. They go down to the laundrette, they go and refill. I think these things could definitely cut down recycling and cut down waste already on campus, especially food waste. We also need to do that. Compost bins are great. We do need to have more student accommodations with compost bin. It needs to be easier. It needs to be incentivized. And, excuse me, we also need to biodiversity. UK is one of the worst in Europe for biodiversity. How can we do that? We need green initiatives. The walls need to be, we can add green walls. This can increase biodiversity. These small things, which we don't think are very big, they can increase our area so much more and make us happier. But also for Sussex to be sustainable, we also do need to have more inclusive living. There's no other way around it. There needs to be cheaper accommodation, and that's it.
Yeah, hang on to it. Cool. The next two questions are from the audience, so thanks for those. Cool. What will you do about pushing the accessible housing policy?
About pushing? Well, basically, I want to have negotiation with the universities, because we do know right now there's 25 that if under 25k household income, you're allowed to get 120 in housing accommodation, which is great. But there's still loads of people. We need to bring back first generation scholarships. I want to, when lobbying the university, most of all, I want to speak their language. What do they listen to? Financial incentives, and how generate in the long term, how much does it generate income for their university? If they cut down housing altogether, that won't work. So what they want to do, we want to find a way to be able to have all the students to have cheaper accommodation, 1/3. So I want to have more petitions, more students involved, more to speak to the uni.
Do you need the question again?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. What will you do about pushing the accessible housing policy?
So currently the accessible housing policy is that disabled students who have a non-suite room or need a fully accessible room, whatever that means, will be the lowest rent on campus, but it's not very inclusive of non-visible disabilities. And so I want to try and expand that so that disabled students have better access to housing, but also currently, there's just a blanket payment for, again, those disabled students that have specific rooms. It's not looking for invisible disabilities either. But also there's a kind of a wider issue around there's this disability grant that the university has, and where is that money going? Because there's not very much of it is actually going to disabled students. So it'd be a wider piece of work on looking at like that grant and how that's broken down and what money is actually going to disabled students to like, make their lives easier. But also in terms of like accessible housing, like that's also financial accessibility too. So there's like a number of areas that the university could absorb costs. So it's like depreciation of buildings, interest rates, and like overheads that university are currently charging to students. And if they absorb those costs, like other universities are doing across the UK, it would make rent cheaper. Oh, hang on a second. Sorry.
Cool. We got one more question, also from the audience. How will you combat climate change and sustainability through what we put in our mouths, presumably food?
Cool. So basically, like the university is obviously currently doing like a huge like catering review at the moment, and they're going out to tender. And a lot of that has been around like doing focus groups with students. But also, I think that we do need to be having more plant-based options in the SU. I've helped co-write a SU food policy, and basically, like, there's been a lot of sort of contention around this because obviously there are people with specific access needs, but also international students. And so, what we want to do is try and push, you know, to have veganism as the like default option, but also have an equal number of plant-based and other options, but also be like incrementally increasing that whilst offering options for people who have access needs, but also for international students as well. Because yeah, like there's a plant-based uni campaign which I've been involved in, but our student body has been also very respectful of the fact that we also have diverse student needs, and those need to be respected as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we need to have more refills on campus, food refills, especially for grains. We can do a cup scheme. We can phase out cup schemes, single-use cup schemes by having a rent a cup scheme, £2, especially in the university cafe. That'll be really useful, especially you can bring it back, get the £2 back. This will cut single-use. And we also want to get food from localized areas, from local communities, from farms nearby. We want to keep everything, and we can also grow a lot when we know we have a community garden. We can also grow more through that. And I just think everything, whilst veganism is definitely a beautiful thing that does cut carbon emissions, the way we can do it is maybe one day a week. We can have no meat on campus, but these small initiatives will actually, in these big numbers, especially on campus of like 19,000 students, will do a huge difference. So, yeah.
We have another question, which I think I'm going to ask because we're missing 2 candidates from this anyway, so I think we have extra time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So the other question is, what have you done to support estranged students and the need for guarantors in Brighton? Or I suppose, what will you do as well?
I can't say what I have done as a student, but what I want to do is traffic light systems for landlords, especially someone that's dealt with bad landlords, and I've had friends that's living in horrible conditions. I think there definitely needs to be a way that students can come to this SU, also to understand where their rights are, where they stand, what they can get, where they are. Like, I don't think a lot of students know what legal advice or access they have or what rights in themselves they have. I think that's definitely the SU can help with, and I think we need to hold landlords accountable, and the only way to hold landlords accountable, we have a traffic light system, which I'm not saying is going to fix the issue, but having a review of what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, called out on the SU website by other students. Would you go back there, they're red and they've got loads of bad reviews? No. So I think students having transparency, I think that's the main thing that's going to help keep landlords at bay.
Yeah. The question is, what have you done to support estranged students and the need for guarantors in Brighton, but also what will you do?
So the university currently has a rent guarantor scheme that not many students really know about. So I think that like expanding that guarantor scheme, but also making it more accessible to students and public, because people who are estranged are obviously going to struggle to get a guarantor, whereas the university can literally be the guarantor. But I think that needs to be more recognised. But also, I've sort of spoken with the housing team this year when there was a lot of international student homelessness, but also I did speak with the Australian students as well and supporting them in getting housing because the university needs to have rooms that are available for students that are in a difficult situation, whether that's because they're estranged or if they're homeless because of like visa issues and housing issues. So yeah, I suppose that those are a couple of points specifically. And then also the university have agreed to kind of work with us on kind of like myth busting what like working with international students, but that would also apply to having international tenants, but that would also apply to like estranged students as well.
All good. All questions done. Well done.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both, and good luck with your campaigns. Right. So the next role we have is Education and Employability Officer. So I would like Austin, Charity, Rose. Again, I'm so sorry for the pronunciation of the name, but Demisola and Matt to the front, please, if you're here.
Hello.
Have we got any other candidates for education and employability in the room? Or is that all we've got? Right. So welcome both of you. I'm going to do 5, just as a heads up, I will do 5 questions just because there are less of you than are running in the election. So the first question, and I will start with you, Rose, is list 3 things that you're most passionate about making change on as an officer.
Hello, my name is Rose. My pronouns are they, she. So the first one is getting more student workers unionised and aware of their workers' rights, because I really don't think they are. And also unionisation is a huge thing at the moment and it needs to be huger, otherwise we won't make any change. Second of all is improving the bursary, hardship fund, scholarship systems for partly cost of living reasons. Also, that should just be a thing that's happening and it's really been slashed by the university, shocker. But yeah, trying to lobby the university to make those better, more accessible, existing would be great. And the third one is making teaching and education at Sussex just accessible in every sense of the word. So like hybrid learning, continue to lobby the university for that and make them actually listen to us. More resources to support students that don't have diagnoses yet. So I used to be a student with an undiagnosed ADHD and it was like hell. But now I have a diagnosis, but still it was not a fun time. Looking into like disability training for staff, essay writing training, like the academic development course we get as foundation students for everyone. That's about it. Yeah, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So, list 3 things that you're most passionate about making change on as an officer.
Firstly, I'm Matt, my pronouns he, they. So yeah, definitely accessibility is a big one. Hybrid learning is not being implemented or even listened to by the university, it seems, at the moment. So I try and lobby them to get them to implement that. The opportunity to equalise education overall, student support has been outsourced drastically, and it's really not up to standard, and that also needs to change. And just improving the students' experience in general. I think currently students have a rough time, and this impedes their ability to access education and employability services. Yeah.
Brilliant. So we'll move on to the second question, which is, what is the biggest problem facing Sussex's approach to teaching and learning, and how will you lobby the university to address this? I'll start with you, Matt.
Yep. So yeah, as I've briefly touched on, hybrid learning, I think, is the biggest issue, because some students aren't always able to get to university, whether that be through illness, whether that be being stuck in a different location, etc. I'll use the research that was conducted for the hybrid learning campaign and the referendum around that won with a huge mandate. And I will take these to the university and be like, we have this mandate, why aren't you listening to us? And yeah, I have ideas on how this can work for both students and lecturers. for example, you could hire like PhD students to assist with this. And I think that's something uni would hopefully listen to. And also, like, for example, the university do hybrid meetings, so why can't our learning be hybrid?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So what is the biggest problem facing Sussex's approach to teaching and learning, and how will you lobby the university to address this?
Yeah, so I think the fact that the university focuses almost entirely on assessment is a massive problem. That there's no necessary support in place to like make this like allowed, really. So I'll try and ensure that there are better resources for students to understand and avoid plagiarism. I've sat on a lot of academic misconduct panels, and it's quite obvious that loads of students just don't know what plagiarism is or what it means. I think if you don't do a foundation year, the introduction to that is really, really subpar. I'm going to work with the student experience department at the university for like a preemptive system for exceptional circumstances, because I think a lot of it is just like, when it's happening, is it suddenly unforeseen? No, don't care, sorry. Trying to change that, because they just see it as students are lying at the moment, which is crazy, but here we are. And again, hybrid, so that students can actually access the content that they're being assessed on, because otherwise it's completely unfair and giving students that can come in person a massive advantage over those that can't, and there's no like support to make that like more equitable. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'll start with you, Rose, for this next question. So this is from the audience, and the question is, what have you done previously to support students in their education and employment prospects? Or like, what will you do as well? I'm trying to add on to that.
Yeah, so I mean,
Sorry, you have to ask that again.
No, that's absolutely fine. So it is, what have you done previously, or it can be kind of what you will do as well, to support students in their education and employment prospects?
Yeah, so I've spoken to loads of students about like CVs as a concept, what that means, what to put on them, like how to actually get an employer to look at you and be like, wow, something different, as opposed to like, I did NCS when I was 15, which is a common thing that people are like, that will win everything. I've done a lot, again, on workers' rights. I've supported a lot of the UCU strikes in massive variety of ways, and got students to understand why that actually needs to happen and why you should be unionised when you're employed, so that you don't get taken advantage of, and which you probably will in employment, so that when you're actually employed, you're not having a horrible time, and you have community and unionisation. And also supported a lot of students through like the EC claim system, and like how to do that and what it means and what it actually means if you don't submit something, and what all of the retake stuff means, because it's a horrible nightmare mess that no one seems to get, that teachers and staff also don't seem to get. So it's really important to have clarity on that and to provide students with that clarity.
Can I have a question?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So what have you done previously, or it can be what will you do as well, to support students in their education and employment prospects?
Yeah, for what I've done before. So I've worked with the UCU in the past to ensure accessibility of strikes, to make sure that they don't disproportionately affect disabled students, and that the strikes in general are accessible to disabled students. And I'm also a member of UCU because I work in a college, and I sort of listen to students daily about their struggles finding a job, and I try and do my best to support them and signpost them in the right direction. And Sussex could definitely do a lot better with that. As for what I would plan to do is, I'm approaching the end of my degree, so I know these issues that students face all too well, unfortunately. I feel more support needs to be offered while students are at university, so students feel comfortable and tooled up when searching for a job. I think there should be more training on employability skills, so students can analyse their own strengths and weaknesses, and this will help them when applying for jobs. And yeah, I think these resources should be available for a certain period after you leave university, as it's not always easy to get a job straight away after uni, and there should definitely be support in place for that.
Brilliant. So I'll have, I think, Matt, you're something that's, yeah. So next question. As you know, the BAME awarding gap is a massive issue for people of colour, students for people of colour. What will you do to reduce this attainment gap?
I think it's about reaching those communities. There's also loads of attainment gaps in disabled students as well, and all marginalised groups. So I think it's important to like try and reach out to those communities, try and find out what their issues with accessing their education are, what issues they're having with finding jobs, and then take this to the university and be like, this is what happens. How can we help this? We need to help this, because otherwise students are going to be disproportionately affected.
Yeah, so a lot of our BAME community are international students, so I would try and make quite an effort to get more essay writing workshops involved so that students understand that our education system is probably completely different to theirs back home, because that's an issue that a lot of students face. I'd also say more like specific things to like focus on that awarding gap rather than just like, if we improve it for all students, then it will just improve. That's not really how it works. So trying to get the university to actually do anything about it, maybe make a working group, maybe like talk to BAME staff to see how they think that it should change, have focus groups with BAME students so to see what they actually think, rather than just, a lot of the time they'll just mention there's an awarding gap in a meeting and go, just so you know, and then we're like, okay, thank you. But yeah, so essay writing stuff, more just generally like how to do university for any group that there's an awarding gap for, because it's just like completely inaccessible constantly to a lot of students, especially like students that don't go to private school. I think that's a common thing, and we don't get taught the like masses of stuff that students who do go to private school for, because that's what you're paying, what, 40k a year for, I guess. But yeah.
Brilliant. We'll do one more question. Just to close this out. So another one from the audience. How will you work with, I don't know if it's mic actually working, how will you work with the rest of the full-time officer team and union staff to ensure the best results for students?
Am I first?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so educational employability is a massive role, because it's literally like students don't just come here for the piece of paper, but a lot of them come here to get a piece of paper, to get educated and then employed. So it kind of encompasses all of the other roles. You love that one. So literally all of the other roles are like part of education and part of your educational experience. So working with other officers is like a really important thing. Like your well-being when you're being educated and then employed is massive, and like living somewhere safe and like not moldy is really important. So I've worked with student living sustainability officer. Again, like there's massive awarding gaps in all of the marginalized groups. So working with diversity, access, participation is really important to like improve that and like make things accessible for all students. But yeah, basically it encompasses literally everything. So working with the other officers is like a massive part of the role, because you can't do any of it by yourself.
Can I have a question?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. How will you work with the rest of the full-time officer team and union staff to ensure the best results for students?
Okay. Yeah, so I'll try and break it down by role, but with diversity, access and participation, you'd be working with them to ensure equal access to education, to ensure that a diverse amount of opinions are being listened to help try and aid education and employability. With student living and sustainability, you don't want to be living in terrible housing, and you don't want to be like treading about the future. So hopefully student living and sustainability officer can assist with making sure that's not as bad, and from an education stance, that would make students feel a lot better. And in terms of well-being, again, focusing on mental health services, making sure that students are able to attend their lectures, their seminars, and if they're not, why that is, and well-being can play a part of that. With sports societies and events, there's student joy is a big thing, and your extracurricular stuff is important. And someone who's been involved with URF for a long time, it's been a massive part of my time at Sussex, and I want everyone to experience that.
Brilliant. So thank you so much, both. Can I have a look at that? Thank you so much, and good luck in the elections. Right, so we're on to our final role of the night, international officer. So a lot of people here. So eulogists, Hannah, Isabella, Medna, Mohammed, Andrilla. I'm awful with names. Oliver Toyin. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that badly.
Paulina, Pranchu, Rico, and Tanmay. If you are here, please come to the front. Is it just Rico?
This format is what an hour with Rico.
So I think we may just have Rico. Well, here are all the candidates for your information. Most of them probably have manifestos that you can read. But what I will say is I'm still very pleased to see you today, Rico. And I think I will probably go through I'll do 3 or 4 questions. And of course, this was scheduled for half an hour. It won't be half an hour, obviously, because there's a lot less candidates here that are running in the elections. But bear in mind that some people can't make it tonight for whatever reason. Please don't go and read their manifestos. Everyone are very busy students doing a lot of different things. So Rico, so lovely to see you today. And I will start you with the first question. List 3 things that you're most passionate about making change on as an officer.
Thanks very much. Hello, my name is Rico, pronounced she, her. Yes. So 3 things that I'm really passionate about working on when I get elected is one of the things is lessen the international students' financial burden, because obviously we know that international student tuition fees are so exploitative. So much money is the international students invest on, but so much less that they get from the university. And the second thing is close the international students awarding gap, and third thing is help promote a sense of community and well-being. I don't know how much time I have, but for example, for the financial burden for international students, I think that there should be more financial support for international students, such as like emergency support for international students, because many of them have to travel back home country, which costs a lot of money for plane and everything. And I think these travel is oftentimes like renewal for passport or like visa thing that requires for international students to basically be legally here. So why don't universities support that? And so these are financial support for international students are absolutely essential. Awarding gap and sense of community and well-being.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Also, sorry to everyone at home that has been hearing this really loud the whole time. We can't hear it in the room, so I'm so sorry if that has been happening. The second question is, what is the biggest challenge faced by international students at Sussex, and how will you lobby the union/university to resolve this challenge?
Thank you. Like where to begin? There's so many that it's so difficult to choose one, because like awarding gap, we've talked about this, financial struggles, we talked about this, because international students oftentimes have multiple layers of struggles, oftentimes being a person of colour, but also a migrant in the UK. But fundamentally, there is a lack of care and pastoral support by the university to even enable international students to organise, to make a positive change, or maybe organize a campaign, because where do you have a capacity when you are struggling to find accommodation as an international student in the UK, when you are having to spend double or the triple amount of times to consume what you're studying? You don't have capacity to even organize things, and there needs to be much better pastoral support for international students, which university used to do, to providing international student support office on campus that they scrapped during COVID. So one of the biggest things around pastoral support is to bring the office back on campus, basically physical campus on campus, to support the international students.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So we've got a question from the audience. Freedom of speech is a massive issue at the moment. How are you balancing international student concerns about censorship with the liberation of other minority groups, bearing in mind intersectionality? If you need a moment to think about that, that's absolutely fine.
Could you repeat the question a bit slower?
Yeah, sorry,
please?
my bad. Freedom of speech is a massive issue at the moment. How are you balancing international student concerns about censorship with the liberation of other minority groups, bearing in mind intersectionality?
Thank you. Obviously, freedom of speech is a big concern for all students, but I agree that there is a bigger concern for international students groups, particularly coming from different backgrounds. But one of the things is definitely listen to international students' concerns, because I would represent international students if I get elected. But obviously, I'm coming from one particular country, one particular cultural background. I'm not really. I need to listen to them. And one of the things is probably to do work to organize a focus group for international students to talk more about this. But also the other part is the raise more awareness around freedom of speech, because obviously freedom of speech bill, there's a non-existent thing, and sometimes outside the UK, and most of the international students are not even aware of, for example, like what that is, what the concept is, or what the new bill is. So I would actively promote the information, improve the transparency from the union to reach out to international students, and trying to have an open discussion with the international students focus group, but also share information about it to raise awareness.
Brilliant. And our final question of the night, how do we support, also from the audience, how do we support international students who want to support UCU strikes?
How do
No, it's absolutely fine. How do we support international students who also want to support UCU strikes?
Oh, okay, that's a really good question. Obviously, international students have a bit of difficulty to support strike in a standard way, such as like skipping lectures and seminars, because they need to be recorded to be reported back to the Home Office because they're on student visa, so they have to attend to a certain amount of lectures and seminars. So the things that the students' union should really be doing is to share more information about like different ways to support strikes. You can wear badges, you can put the merchandise of UCU, you can put the flyers in the lecture room that maybe they're studying, or you can even stand in the picket line and spread the words, or maybe you can even talk to the cohorts about UCU striking, what that is, because there's even much less lack of awareness about UCU and what the strike is within the international students community. So I would definitely like to support these students, international students would like to support the strike by sharing information, that's the first thing, and also encouraging them to take an action with the students' union and UCU, because oftentimes when most of the cohorts are not really engaging with the students' strike, then like how would you have a courage to do that? So I would like to encourage them to do these things with the students' union.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Thank you everyone, thank you Rico for coming to meeting with us tonight, and good luck in the elections. Right, so thank you all so much for coming tonight. We have had a wonderful chance to hear from so many of our wonderful candidates. Of course, not all of them could make it tonight, so please don't forget to vote. SussexStudent.com/elections, scroll down, big button, log in with your Sussex email, and then you can vote. It is a preferential system. You rank from the candidate you like the best to the candidate you like the most. You can pick one, you can pick all of them, you can pick 3 open nominations if you want, or you can spoil your vote. But do vote, it is really important, and also do read the manifestos of not only the people you've seen here tonight, but also the people who couldn't make it. People have a variety of commitments, which means they can't make it to these events. But yeah, thank you so much for attending, and I hope to see you on results night on Friday.
Thank you, Alex.
Hello.
To turn the mic on.